Today, I have a very special guest with me. It is Hilary. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun to be here. I love your intro. You just have it down. You know exactly how to share resources with your audience. I love it.
Absolutely. I mean, we're talking about branding today, so I feel like this is the perfect intro to, like connecting with the brand, the messaging, and everything. So I'm super excited. Before we dive in, though, I'm just going to let the audience know a little bit more about you. So because you have such an incredible background, from movie marketing exec at Disney, Pixar, and Marvel to brand strategist for entrepreneurs with big dreams, Hilary Hartling is obsessed with helping you shape all the thoughts and ideas in your head into a clear and cohesive brand that resonates. Hilary's superpower is messaging that positions your brand to speak the love language of your ideal audience so that you can grow your business doing what you love and creating the impact that you desire. Love this. So, in this interview, we're going to be talking about the three common brand mistakes that entrepreneurs make and share the three key brand building and messaging strategies that Hilary has used during her 15 years working at Disney, marketing movies from global entertainment brands that also work for entrepreneurs no matter the size of your business. Super excited for this topic, but super excited for this topic. But before we get started, could you share a little bit more about your business and your journey with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had my business now, my brand strategy business for almost 5 years. And it seems incredible because I feel like I was at Disney for like most of my career. It was 15 years there. But at Disney, that's a global entertainment brand and it's a brand that comes with built-in fans. It comes with an audience that's like so excited to watch what you do next. So there, it's like the brand was built, and everything that I did in marketing films and creating franchises that ran across the whole company, it was about kind of not messing it up, but also how do you create an unexpected surprise and delight to over deliver on with your audience, with the fans that are already built in. And so a lot of the strategies I use, it was all about positioning, it was all about messaging. But I'll tell you that like anything you do for a brand that big is the same for a brand that's even just starting, right? So they're gonna be executed on different levels, but the idea behind it and how you get really clear on your messaging and how you start to resonate with your audience by building a brand that means something to them, it's the same. So that's what's so exciting about it.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because, for example, for Disney and Pixar and Marvel, when we think of the brand, we think of the logo, we think of, the characters, we think of the stories that are behind each brand. But then for entrepreneurs, it's more about the person a lot of the time, or for small business owners, it's about the products that they have or the service that they have. So what do you think is so important? Like, how do we kind of convey that brand message or the brand voice or the experience through all these different types? You say they all tie in together, but how do you like come from a logo perspective, a personal brand perspective? How do we kind of bring that experience for our audience?
Yeah, well, that's why it's funny because what you bring up is very, very common among entrepreneurs. It's like there are so many pieces and parts. It's like, where do you start,
Hmm.
right? Where do
Hmm.
you start, and how do you know if you're even on the right track? And
Yeah.
that's what comes up a lot, which is why, I mean, honestly, it's why I created in what I do in my business is I take people through a very step by step, every lesson builds on the one before kind of process so that you're building it also in the right order, right? A
Hmm.
lot of people want to go straight to logo. And that's one of my
Yeah.
first recommendations is like, oh, if you've done your logo first, it's fine. But if you have a choice right now, don't start with your logo. You're going to want to change it by the time we're done with your brand strategy.
That's true actually. Because if you're thinking, you go on Canva, you go on Google and just find different logos. A lot of the time, you might look for something that you like, not what your ideal audience would like.
That's
And
right.
that's the whole thing about branding strategy. You can't just go in thinking about yourself. You have to think about your ideal audience. Even though a lot of the time you might be or where you were might be your ideal audience, it's also not the same. So I love this topic. Let's
Yeah.
dive right in and talk about the branding mistakes that people make.
Yeah, I think the very first mistake that I see is like when you assume that your audience understands what you do, what you're talking about, and what you're offering, right? You might be using insider
Mm,
lingo, right? They call it inside baseball, right? When you're using
mm-hmm.
all these like baseball terminologies and like someone who doesn't understand anything about baseball, who's not a fan of it, doesn't understand anything you're saying, right? And so it's kind of like what you just said. It's getting out of your own head and understanding where it is your client, your target audience sits, and what's
Mm-hmm.
their current understanding, so that you can speak their language and not basically not just live in your own world. I get this a lot with entrepreneurs who are moving from a corporate type job into entrepreneurship, where in corporate they had to be a little bit more formal, and
Mm-hmm.
they used bigger words even a lot of the times, right?
Yeah.
And I would say, if the mistake is assuming your audience gets what you do by what you're saying, then the strategy you want to employ is to be clear. You want to be
Mm-hmm.
clear over clever, right? Because you don't want to get overly creative with your words. A lot of times entrepreneurs think that's what can make them stand out, if they say it this way or this way, or they shock someone by saying it that way. And if your positioning sacrifices clarity, then
Mm-hmm.
it's not worth it, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want your audience to be crystal clear that you're speaking to them. You want
Mm-hmm.
them to know that exactly what you're talking about is meant for them, to invite them in,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know?
think there's a fine line between, like being clear and being creative, because
Yes.
we don't want to sound like a robot, right? We don't want to sound like every other person and all our competitors out there. But how do you suggest we, research, or how do we come up with this, a kind of language that would set ourselves apart, but at the same time still resonate with our ideal audience?
It's a combination of things, and it depends on the business. But essentially what you're going to do is, number one, you have to get clear on your own bigger why, right? The
Mm,
why behind your business is number one. Because, and like you said earlier, a lot of times for entrepreneurs specifically, they are a version of their ideal client. So I call that the mirror test, right? Look in the
mhm,
mirror. Are you a version? Would you have been a client a couple years ago, right?
mhm,
But the other thing is really talking to them. You have to, once you identify who your ideal clients are, and that's a process as well, you have to actually go out and speak to them. You actually have to do what I call informational interviews, ideal client interviews. And you have to ask them about what they're dealing with right now, what their challenges are, what's their number one challenge when it comes to the thing that you do. Because you might be thinking in your head, like, I could say, oh man, I feel like the biggest problem is that everybody is going straight to their logo, when in fact, they don't even know how to say what they do, right?
mm.
So you have to actually listen to the words that are coming straight out of their mouth. Those words are what you turn into your messaging.
Hmm. I
Because
love that you brought that up, because I think a lot of the time people, like you said, they just jump into it. They're like, okay, I think I need a logo right now, I'm just gonna do it, instead of going out there and talking to people. How would you suggest entrepreneurs that's listening right now, how should they go out and talk to someone? Do they just go on social media, or how should they approach this?
there's so many different ways. Yes, if they have a following on social media, they can absolutely like reach out and say, hey, like poll their audience, like who here is, and describe your ideal client, right? Are you a female entrepreneur with a service-based business and you're working on creating a course? Like, you want to get specific with your niche. So whatever your niche is, ask them. And then, see, and you have to make sure it's not a sales pitch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're inviting them on to an informational interview. Like, do you want to have a chance to like jump on a Zoom with me, because I have some questions, because I'm always looking to do my own market research to find out what it is that you guys need most, right? And just ask. So I would ask on social media. There's also in Facebook groups, right? If you've joined the
Mm.
right groups where your ideal clients are hanging out, which I highly recommend,
Yep.
right? Like, if you're someone who is speaking just to wedding photographers,
Mm.
then you want to jump in those Facebook groups where they're all hanging out, right? And people are really awesome with their time. If someone says no, then they're probably not your ideal client anyways, honestly. But
Mm-hmm.
reaching out and ask, and I promise that there's a lot of people out there, even if you're just starting your business, you could probably think of at least 3 people who would be an ideal client that you already know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not Aunt Vicky, by the way, who has nothing to do with what you want to do. It's not someone who's just available. It's someone who actually fits your ideal client description.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have to get on the phone and ask them. And that concept never stops. So whether you're at the beginning and trying to figure it all out, or you're growing and you're evolving, you have to always be in touch with your audience so that you remain relevant,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because what they were dealing with, maybe their biggest challenge 2 years ago, is not the thing they're challenged with right now, which is
Mm-hmm.
like what you saw that happened with even the global pandemic, right? Everybody's work from home situation and what their business looked like changed a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody pivoted in some fashion, whether it was big or small. And so you have to like think about that as like, this is what your ideal clients are going through.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to always be sort of in context and relevant to what's happening with them and what their biggest number one problems are that you can help them solve easily.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
I,
this
I
is about.
I think you brought up 2 points that I really love, because the first one was, don't just talk to your relatives, your friends, because of course they'll be there to support you. I'm sure you can tell them all about your business, but they're probably not your ideal audience. And even if one of your friends is, like, not everyone is, you can tell them about your business and your ideas, but you need to be going out there and talking directly to that specific person, that specific niche, to really hone in and understand how you should be talking to them, the lingo that they use. I love that you said the insider lingo.
Mhm.
And then the second thing that I really love that you brought up is, you have to be constantly communicating, even though you might already have your brand set up. It doesn't matter. You, like, throughout the journey, throughout the years, or like the even months or weeks since you first started your business, things will change. So continue to discuss and continue to talk to these people to understand how they have changed and how you have changed and how you can continue to help and support them. I love those. And so the first mistake that you see people make is the not being clear on
Yes.
their branding
Yes.
language.
Trying to be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit too clever, not being clear. So
Mm-hmm.
clear over clever is like the thing to remember.
Mm-hmm. Love that. So what's the second mistake that you see people make?
That one is really about targeting and speaking to everybody, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs think they've heard this idea of narrowing your niche,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or honing in on one specific ideal client. And they think by doing that, right, they're leaving money on the table.
Mm-hmm.
That what they do could be for everybody. So why wouldn't they target everybody? But what happens then is that your messaging gets watered down, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't speak to everyone and actually resonate with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
If you actually choose a group of people, and here's the thing, different brands also have like different audience segments, right? So like one brand might be like, no, my only client, ideal client is a female wedding photographer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But another business might have multiple audience segments and they need to be able to speak into each one of them with distinct messaging. They're not
Mm-hmm.
offering the same messaging, right? I know an entrepreneur who serves both people who want to find their dream job and start their dream business. Those are two very different people, right? Finding your
Mm-hmm.
next job, that comes with, how do I build my resume? What are some great interviewing tips? How do I know this company aligns with my values? Like all those kinds of ideas. But if you're building your dream business, well, those are completely different things. It's like, well, what kind of business? How can I validate my business idea so that I know I have ideal clients waiting in the wings who can't wait to work with me? They're completely different. And so if you tried to message to both of those audiences simultaneously, it it will lose its luster. You won't reach any of them. It won't matter to either.
Mm-hmm. So
Mhm.
how does this entrepreneur that how does she position herself then to be speaking with two different types of audience?
Well, basically, she has an overarching message that's about, because it's for women, about
Mm-hmm.
women really loving their work. But then
Mm-hmm.
when you get into her website or on her social profiles, she takes you down the rabbit hole of like, just like, click here if you're looking for your dream job, click here if you're wanting to learn how to start your dream business, right? So
Mm-hmm.
she automatically takes them down a rabbit hole so that the only messaging they're seeing is the one that is actually, it pertains to them.
Yeah. So the most important part is the messaging. It doesn't matter if you have 10 services, 10 products, but as long as you have that message that kind of applies to all the different things that you do and talks to that ideal audience, then that would work. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. There's the targeting and speaking to everybody, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the strategy that you want to employ is really like, how do you speak the language of your ideal clients, right? When we talk about that love language, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you speak their language? And the way you do that is you have to know them again. It's going
Mm-hmm.
back to like the first step of like, how do you get really clear? Well, you ditch the avatar, number one.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of spicy of me to say. Ditch the avatar and actually focus on creating a real client profile and talking to real people about their real problems and their real goals and ambitions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you want to show your audience that you understand them. You want to show that you actually care about them. That's what's going to start to resonate when you actually have an emotional connection with your audience and you establish a relationship. If they
Mm-hmm.
know that you can relate to their biggest challenges and you can help them solve some of their biggest problems, they're in. They're yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So it's very much about that personal relationship as well. Because, yeah, a lot of the time, like, again, for me, I think of, Disney, and it makes me feel a certain way. And Marvel makes me feel a certain way. But it's not because I'm thinking about the logo or it's the messaging that they're doing. It's the branding. It's the way that they make you feel throughout everything that they do. So
Yeah, it's
for, yeah.
experience. That's
Yeah.
what it is. That's how I define a brand. Your brand is an experience that you deliver to your audience.
Absolutely. So,
Mhm.
what's the third mistake that you see people make when it comes to branding?
I think it's really, and this is more for beginning, but it can happen when you evolve too. But thinking that your brand has to be perfect to even get started.
Oh my gosh, this is a big one.
It's a big one because it is mindset, right? But it's also
Hmm.
like it's also like comparisonitis and all this other. You're looking at other brands and like, oh, mine's not up to that level. But everybody's brand beginnings look a certain way, right? And what comes back to me on this one is actually my time at Disney, which is an interesting kind of analogy. But I remember John Lasseter, who was heading up the Pixar animation studios at the time, told me something that stuck with me till this day, obviously, because I'm saying it to you right now. But
Hmm.
it's, I was asking him about how he felt about like perfecting his film. And he goes, Hillary, my films are never done. We just release them.
Ah.
Because it means the animators, the filmmakers, they could keep tweaking and tweaking and trying to make it more perfect. And as soon as it got to this date where we're supposed to release it, we push it back because, oh, in Finding Nemo, we have a new technology that makes the underwater
Hmm.
sequences look even more realistic. And we could put that, right? But maybe even
Hmm.
to the audience's like normal naked eye, like an animator is different looking at it,
Yeah.
but the normal audience probably would never tell the difference. But to the
Hmm.
animators, they're like, oh no, we could perfect this even more. But you have to like, you have to call it, right? First of all, there's a
Hmm.
release date, but only when you actually release something into the world, then do you get the audience feedback, you get
Hmm.
market research, and you can continue to not only perfect your craft, but perfect your marketing of that craft.
Hmm. Yeah,
Right. And so it's
absolutely.
the same for an entrepreneur, right? You can't plan everything in isolation. You have to release it into the world, perfect or not, so that you can get the market research and the feedback to help you tweak, to help you evolve, to help you grow. And I
Hmm.
think that's something I've just seen like, and anything from Hillary, gosh, I don't have this a shirt that matches my hex code from my color palette. How can I take brand photos? I'm like, oh, we're overthinking it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that is true.
Hmm.
So when it comes to staying consistent, because now you're talking about the sweatshirt, and that got me thinking, how do we stay consistent with our brand? Because there's a visual element, there's also the brand messaging.
Hmm.
How do we, convey our brand and make that brand experience for our audience through our website, our social media, through like our sales pages, our products? How do we make sure that, people are feeling, we can convey that feeling through everything that we do?
Yeah. Well, that's why you create your brand strategy foundation, right?
Hmm.
So when you go through my program called the Brand Polish Academy, at the end of it, your takeaway is a brand guidebook that has everything in it. But it's not just a style guide. A style guide has your colors with the hex codes and the fonts and the
Mm-hmm.
logos and all of that. You can put that in there. But what I'm talking about is that
Mm-hmm.
plus all of the messaging. What is the experience? We create your key brand words. We do your mission, your vision, your core values, your taglines for both the brand as an overall brand and also marketing taglines. How do you position your story? So you have this Bible for your brand that tells you how to show up. And so then when you're looking at your website, you take that and say like, okay, great. How do I show up this way on my website? And one of the things I always like to like ask myself, no matter what I'm doing, it could be a website, it could be an Instagram post, it could be planning a new training. I ask myself, what's the purpose of this training? What's the purpose of this post? What's the purpose of this page on my website? And how do I want my audience to feel? What do I want them to know? And then what do I want them to do? And if you can answer those questions, and a lot of them are already mapped out in your brand strategy foundation, then it's easier to implement, because if something doesn't align with this brand foundation that you've set up, you automatically know that. You can even say yes and no to opportunities that fly into your space, right? Where it's like, oh, shiny object summit, someone's inviting me to, right? Well, if it's not aligned with your brand's mission or the audience isn't similar to your own, the answer is no, right? But if it's an easy yes, like, oh my gosh, that's
Yeah.
perfect, then, right, it's like it just helps you get clear in your own mind exactly what your brand is, who it's for, and how you start talking about it, so it doesn't just like skim the surface, but it goes deeper and it reaches your audience specifically on an emotional level, so they're like, oh, finally I found you. I can't believe I found the answer for me, and it's you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. And inside this entire strategy and making sure everything's aligned, do you think it's important to think about your vision as well and where you see your business going?
100% vision is actually included for sure. That is the bigger why and the purpose. And also, it's like that bigger, loftier goal that you're aiming for. It tells you how to show up on a daily basis to do your mission that takes you every step forward to reach that vision. A funny story, I was just on a discovery call with a new client today, and they have their vision nailed. Like their North Star is so strong.
Ah.
It's like, wow. But what they were having problems with was translating that bigger vision into a daily actionable message that told people how they do that, right? People were so excited by this bigger why and this vision of where they're headed and what they want to create in the world. But when they said like, so, okay, so how do you do that? And how can we work with you? What do we do next? They didn't have a great way of articulating that. So you have to have both. You have to have the big visions. So you can tell people, this is why my brand exists in the world, and this is the reason why we're aiming for this. But then you also have to say, and this is how we're doing it for you today.
Do you mind giving us an example of a vision?
So I would say my vision right now, and oh my gosh, you can do vision statements in so many different ways. But my vision is, and I'm brand strategy, is inspiring, is empowering entrepreneurs to do work that inspires them. Because when you're inspired by your work, that's when you do your best work, and that's the work that's going to change the world. Right?
I
So
love that.
my vision is all about inspiring people to really find the thing that they're most passionate about, because that's the thing that's going to make a difference.
And I guess all of your small actions every single day, your brand, your visual elements, as well as your messaging and the experience that you bring, they all tie into this vision that you have, right?
They do. And you know what's funny is I used to do this. I didn't even realize I did this, but even when I was in corporate at Disney, I would do this even like walking into a meeting, right? Where I would, before I walked through the door, I would think in my head, what are the 3 outcomes I want in this meeting? And I would be like, well, I want to be successful. I want them to talk about how we're the perfect fit and something, right? I would come up with 3 words. When I got in the room, I would sit down and I would write it in my notebook and then flip the page so no one could see it. And whenever I did that, probably 85% of the time, someone in the meeting has said all 3 words to me over the course of, because that was my intention. So that's how I showed up. Right. And so it's the same thing with your brand. So you have to have this intention behind the brand. And then when you show up that way, people say it back. Like, so people, when they land on my website, they're like, I got so inspired that I had to get in touch. Like, or I finally felt like you were the answer. And so I can't wait to work with you. I had
Mm-hmm.
someone telling me, like, I had someone speaking to me like they were my best friend already, just from reading through my website. And that's
Mm.
that's when you think about crafting an experience for your audience, that's what we're talking about. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you really want to make them feel? Because you can write the words, have the photos, have the design that makes them feel that way, but it really is a synergistic process, right? It's how, it's not like some people think in your logo it has to say everything about your brand. It needs to
Mm-hmm.
be red because of this reason. It needs to have a butterfly because of this reason. It needs to, like, whatever. And it's like, actually, it's not true. The simpler, the better. It wants to communicate an overall feeling, but it's how every piece of your brand works together in harmony that creates the full picture and the full story and the full experience.
Yeah. Oh, that's
Mhm.
amazing. And I'm curious because, you've worked with such huge company like Disney and Pixar and, Marvel and all these different brands. And how would you say that they communicate with you their vision, or how do they make sure that all the employees are aligned? Because everyone's different, right? How do you make sure that if, say, an entrepreneur that's listening right now, she's thinking about outsourcing, I'm planning to hire a VA, a designer, or whomever,
Mhm.
how do you make sure that they know what you want for your brand?
You have a brand guidebook.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you build the foundation, you put it in a book, because that's literally what you share with a brand designer, a team member, a brand photographer, a copywriter, anyone at all who is going to be translating your brand into the world. You have to
Mm-hmm.
tell them what that brand means. So
Mm-hmm.
at Disney, we had people who positioned the brand for each individual movie
Wow.
and underneath the umbrella of each individual, like Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, Marvel, Touchstone, Lucasfilm, everyone
Mm-hmm.
had a vision for that specific brand
Mm-hmm.
and what fell in and out of it. And then per movie, you would come up with the positioning that would speak to the audience that was aligned with the bigger. You always had to have that bigger brand in mind. And it's the same with entrepreneurs. Like when you go to create a program or a digital course, that is your sub brand. That has to be aligned with your bigger brand and what your bigger promise is for your client, right? So your brand promise is, you're going to go from feeling this way to feeling this way and have this result so that you can have this ultimate benefit. And if you have that promise laid out for not only your bigger brand as a whole, but then for each individual offer, so you can also see distinctly how the offers differ and take you on a journey that adds more value and more value and more value. That's how you really get clear with your audience.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with you being clear, because if you're confused, that will come across to your audience and then they won't know what to do with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's the first thing that you advise entrepreneurs do right now to help them get clear on their brand?
I think the very first thing that is a simple first step is really creating a clear positioning statement. And that's actually in my freebie, right? It's your
Ah,
brand.
awesome.
Yeah, it's your brand superpower in one clear statement. And that one, you probably have the link to that, Venice,
Yes.
but if they go to my Instagram, it's a link in the bio, or they can go to my website, hilaryhartling.com/resources, and it's right there on the page.
Perfect. And
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit more about this freebie?
Yeah, basically, it's going to help you craft one statement that's
Mm-hmm.
going to tell people what you do, who
Mm-hmm.
it's for, and their biggest motivation.
Perfect. Oh, that's so incredible. I think I have
Yeah,
to go check it out for myself as
go
well. I
check
love
it
that.
out.
Well, we have to unfortunately start wrapping up. But before I let you go, do you mind sharing a little bit more about where people can connect with you and find out more about what you offer?
Yes, it is Hilary Hartling everywhere, and it's with one L. It's HilaryHartling. So it's Hilary Hartling on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, LinkedIn, all the places, and it's hilaryhartling.com. So if you want to check out all the resources and programs, I would recommend just hopping on over to my website at hilaryhartling.com. And I hang out the most in the DMs on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'll make sure to put everything in the description box as well as the show notes. So for entrepreneurs that's listening, in case you need to get a summary of the interview, you can check out the description box for all the links. We've got our live interviews with experts here twice a week. So make sure to stay tuned and join our community on Facebook. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll chat with you very soon and have a great rest of your day.